Okay. Please ask away if you have any questions.
You should start with something.
Something. My journey as a writer. Yeah. Okay. So I have a degree in engineering actually. I have a computer science engineering degree. So everyone thinks that everyone introduces me always as an engineer who found her way to being a writer, but that's actually not true at all. I was a writer who was forced to become an engineer who came back to writing. Yeah, same, Nimdu? Same. So in Bangalore, we do engineering just those 4 years to figure out what we want to do in life. That's the thing. That's why there are so many engineers in Bangalore. Why? And that's why so many engineers are not doing engineering, which is a sad thing, because that's why the state of our roads is like this. If engineers were engineering, I think things would have been better. But everybody uses the 4 years to think about what they want to do, and they do amazing things. You'll see engineers doing all kinds of things. In my case, I always wanted to write. I think at the age of 8 or something, I decided I wanted to write. And then of course, my parents said absolutely not, because it will not pay. That is true. Writing does not pay. So you have to do it as a labor of love. But when I consider actually myself as one of the very lucky ones who knew what I wanted to do when I was very young, because even there are so many people who at 30, 35 still don't know what they want to do in life. And especially these days, because there is so much choice. You guys are so lucky in some ways to have so much choice. You can be anything. But it's also the tyranny of choice. Because there is so much choice, it's very difficult to decide. And even if you do decide, you always second guess yourself that maybe something else is better. It's like, when you go to a store and it allows bargaining, you're never sure that you got the right price. But if you go to a fixed price store, you feel there's no thinking about after that. You buy it and it's... So I always wanted to be a writer. And I used to write little notes, little journals whenever I used to go out for a family picnic or something, come back and write about it. If I met a celebrity by chance, then I would write about the experience. I remember once, during a period in my childhood, I used to collect autographs. That was the thing, one great... and
We all did.
We all did, huh? It was a generation thing, I think, maybe. Collecting autographs.
These days they take selfies.
So, yeah, true. So we used to collect autographs. I used to collect autographs, and but how many people? I didn't meet very many famous people faced. Mukhamukhi was very difficult. So if I went to a cricket match in Chinnaswamy, then maybe if somebody got me a special seat close enough to the cricketers or something, then you can get. But otherwise, I used to write to people by regular snail mail, saying, please send me your autograph. And I enclose one tiny, remember we used to, I don't know, the people of my age here will remember that we used to get tiny things called autograph books.
Yes.
So tiny, they used to be tiny, and they'll be like different colored pages with some pattern on it. And so I used to tear out a page from that tiny book, put it in an envelope, find out the address. Finding out address was very hard. And then write a letter, handwritten letter of course, saying that please send me an autograph and a photograph. Like, as if they're not doing you a big favor already by sending you first.
An audience for that.
Audience means some people, I had marked out some. So in the Kannada lesson, I think 10th standard or 9th standard, non-detailed textbook, we had a lesson on Tenzing Norgay. That's how I found out about Tuji Che Chomolungma, and it had started like that. So Chomolungma is what they call Everest anta nange gothirilla, through that. So then I became fascinated with Tenzing. Then somehow found out the address of the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute. I wrote him a letter and he actually sent it.
Wow.
And then he died. So it's a very valuable piece of paper that I have. My age. I would have been 13 or something. 13, 14, yeah. Or maybe a little. Yeah, because 9th standard only I read the book. So 14 I would have been. So that. Then after that, who else did I? And sent to Mother Teresa. I wrote to the Missionaries of Charity. And she sent me a thing back. And then Ram Krishna Hegde was a big crush. Okay, so I wrote to, one day what happened, we lived quite close by in Sheshatripura. So I was passing by the golf course and he was coming out of the Chief Minister's residence. And I waved and I jumped around. He didn't see me. So I went back and I wrote him a letter that I waved to you, you didn't wave back, but at least you can send me your autograph. He's such a darling. He wrote a letter to me, hand wrote, saying, I'm so sorry I did not wave to you, but here is my photograph and here is my autograph in 3 languages, Kannada, Hindi. How could you not love such a man? I don't care about his politics. That was later. I was young. He responded to a child in the best possible way. So that was wonderful. Why did I start telling the story? I don't know. But anyway, so I used to do that kind of thing, pen friends, those kind of things. And my mom said there's no money in this. And she also put this nice googly argument which said that I want my daughters to be financially independent. So if you write and all, there is no money in it. So please study engineering or medicine. My daughter, middle class dream. My older sister, medicine done. So I was the second one. So you do engineering. My brother became lawyer. Correctly. So my parents are fully protected. Doctor, engineer. I don't know what engineers do. We don't know how to fix anything in the house. But anyway, it was just
Expectation.
yeah, expectation
What
that you would.
subject you did?
Computer science.
Engineering.
And that was one of the early batches, I think, of computer science. And I went to UVC, which was, so it was very nice. Anyway, did that.
Accommodates you, your engineering days,
That's-
setting or the other way around. And
Engineering days are
yeah, when we don't have
Like,
anything,
yeah.
the mismatch
Yeah.
that haunts us.
Yeah,
When we-
yeah, engineering haunted me for a long time because I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be doing BA literature, English literature in Mount Carmel or something because my parents would not even send me. I wanted to go to Stephens or whatever. Obviously, chance illa, like you will not leave in front of my eyes only. So I said, okay, fine. So did engineering and finished. But so yeah, it really haunted me. I hated engineering college. Made some very good friends. But otherwise I didn't enjoy it at all. But the aim was finish it in 4 years and get out. Then because that was a deal with my mom that after that you can do what you want. And I'm sure she hoped that I would be over it by then. And because I would have spent 4 years doing it, then she'll get a nice software job. Maybe she'll go to do MS in America. Then I can tell all my friends that nam mangla anta. Chance illa, finished engineering, gave her the degree certificate. ನೀವು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಪೂಜೆ ರೂಮಲ್ಲಿ ಆರತಿ ಮಾಡಿ ನಾನು ಹೊರಟೆ ಅಂತ. So
Okay, fast forward. Tell me when you started earning.
earning, that's what immediately started earning very, very little. But I had decided by then that I wanted to write for children because I grew up only reading Enid Blyton. Okay, that was my generation. We read only, and luckily she was a British author for you boys who may not know. Enid Blyton. Oh, okay, wonderful. My children never read. Oh, you're a fan? Oh, wonderful. And the wonderful thing was they were this one circulating libraries.
Yeah.
Every neighborhood had one, and somehow every library had rows upon rows of Enid Blyton books. And we never ran out because she wrote 700 books.
Yes.
700 books in her lifetime. Apparently, she used to churn out like 10,000 words a day. That kind of prolific. And so she has been constantly in England, in the UK. She's not thought of as an amazing writer. She's thought of as being very moralistic, preachy. And they think that she must have had a factory of people writing for her that she put her name on. And she has always denied it. And I'm sure she did not because it's all her. When you read her books, you know it's her. So I grew up thinking, which was great to read in Blyton because she wrote beautifully, the plotting was fantastic, the characters are amazing, and how to keep a story ticking, adventure. She was very good at that. So I learned all of that from her. But I grew up feeling that only British children had great childhoods and my childhood sucked. Because my childhood didn't look anything like those children's childhoods. There were never any adults in any of her books, right? You've all read the books. There are no adults around. Adults' job is to come and give Secret 7 meeting, put biscuits outside. But not be involved at all. And adults come in only when the kids have policemen. They've already caught the smugglers, they've done everything, the children, and then the police come to take them away. That's all. And I was like, my life, and they had the most amazing picnics, they were always cycling and going somewhere, they were boating and going somewhere to some island by themselves, children. And I was like, my life is just surrounded by adults all the time who are always telling me what to do or wanting to know where are you going, when are you coming back, monitoring continuously. And the picnics they used to have, they used to always eat out of tins. And it was sausage and ham, and I didn't know at all what those things were. And I was a vegetarian South Indian child lusting after that food because Enid Blyton wrote so beautifully about food. And that's when I realized that the power of words, you can make anybody believe anything. That you can be totally transformed and believe that that's the life you want. After when I grew up, because my life was so many children, cousins, aunts, uncles in one ambassador car and only two places for picnic, Lal Bagh or Kaban Park, and when at lunchtime only Chitrana, Mosranna and steel dabbas and maybe some little extra because it was a picnic. Okay, so I said, my life is... Otherwise she wrote these boarding school books, which were also so exciting. I so wanted to go to boarding school. Yeah, I wanted to go to boarding school. I begged my parents to send me to boarding school. They looked at me as a crazy or what, when we are at home, please stay at home. But when I grew up, what happened was I began to read history and I realized that those children were roaming around unsupervised in the countryside, eating out of tins because England was at war. Second World War was going on and London was in great danger of being bombed because German Air Force could see the buildings and there was a way to spot them. So the children were sent away to the country to be with relatives who did not want them, but they had to do it out of duty, and they would not give them only cold supper and give them tins of food and say you head out and do what you like and come back only in the evening to sleep. So it must have been very traumatic for those children. Enid Blyton was part of that generation, but in her mind, in a child's mind, imagination can take on such beautiful forms that she believed, I think that's how they used to have fun, like, okay, there's a light shining, maybe it's a smuggler thing, maybe, you just imagine these things and keep yourself happy. And there is no fun eating out of tins actually. And that's when I realized that actually my life was quite wonderful. And the reason why we never had to think about war was that since 1799, since Tipu Sultan died, we have had no conflict in this region. We are in the middle of Deccan Plateau, no tsunami, no earthquake, no nothing. What a charmed life. And enough adults who cared for me to wake up early and cook me a fresh meal if there is a picnic. And then I came across a magazine called Target, which was an Indian children's magazine. I had not read it before. Otherwise, I used to read Chandamama. I loved Chandamama, and I loved Amachitrakatha, but they were all mythological stories. There were no children like me in any of those stories. In fact, there were no children at all. Okay, and the only 3 children's stories were, I think, Prahalada, Nachiketa and Dhruva. And they were all sons of kings and they were all boys.
What about Panchatantra?
Panchatantra, but animal stories. No, I want to see myself in a story. No, that is the thing. That was not there. There were no children's stories. And then I came across this magazine called Target, which came out of Delhi, out of the India Today stable. And there, Indian writers were writing stories about Indian children like me. And their lives were seeming to be a lot of fun because of how they wrote them. And I said, that is my life. So my life is fun. I mean, I had to have somebody hold up a mirror and show it to me that my life is fun. And that's when I decided that I would be a writer for children. Indian children. I'd write Indian stories for Indian children so that another generation doesn't grow up feeling life is elsewhere.
But then I read your book. I read Gita for Children. And so at school, I was in TPS Varanasi and it used to give us...
I'm going there at the end of this month, TPS Varanasi.
Really?
Yeah.
They're having literally...
Yeah.
But you cancelled on Manipal, now I'm in Manipal.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm busy those days, September, no? 18th, 17th, 18th, something. That's why, I'm busy, I'm not here. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Tell me what you were saying.
Yeah, so our school used to give us books every semester, in the beginning of every semester. So it was my brother's book and it was at my home. I wanted to read Mahabharat, this one, Jaya by
Devdutt.
Devdutt, yeah. So, but then it was already at home, your book. So I just picked it up and I just randomly started reading what it's all about. And I ended up finishing the entire book in 2 or 3 days. And the way you have broken up the concepts of Gita, I mean, I was really a fan.
Thank you.
And right now also I'm emceeing at some event, somebody is replacing me so that I
Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you.
I
Thank you.
ask you one thing.
Yeah.
In couple of books, including Gita for Children, right, which I read to him and I asked him to read by reading it so I can explain the concepts and everything. Right? how do you relate non-fiction to fiction and all of it together, right? It's so difficult in this generation to explain and bring those concepts from the history and all our pathology and everything, and then actually put it into reality.
Yeah.
Because these kids, I mean, I'm not saying they are denying it, they are not having less of things, but still it lists our own culture, right?
Yeah, actually, you know what I realized while I was putting the Gita for children together was that I had never read the Gita either.
Yeah.
Even our generation has not read much of the scripture at all. So for me, it was for me itself, it was a revelation. I did not grow up in a home that even had a copy of the Gita.
So we had this poster of Gita everywhere in our house.
No, we didn't. I didn't have at all.
I genuinely believe it's not for children.
Well, it's for every, no, I think I don't think any child goes to a bookstore and picks up a book called the Gita for Children. It's always the adult who picks it up, I think.
But then
So,
on the book cover it was written it was Gita for children.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I still tell everyone that I've read Gita for children, but then it's really not that.
Yeah. So that's why that might have helped me because I didn't have any reverence for it or hadn't been brought up that you have to bow before it. So when I went to it finally, because my editor said I should write it, I didn't choose to write it. I refused to write it. I was terrified about writing it. Because you boys read Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan, yeah. You've read some Percy Jackson, yeah. So Rick Riordan writes, he's an American author, and he writes about Greek mythology and Greek gods in the modern age. So he can do what he likes. He takes them from the top of Mount Olympus, he puts them on Empire State Building, he says America is the new center of the world, that time it was Greece, so now they live here. Whatever he wants, and there's no problem because nobody worships those gods. But the Bhagavad Gita is very sensitive. People feel very deeply about it. So I was very terrified, especially as someone who had never grown up with it or deeply engaged with it. I'm like, who gives me the right to write this book? But I think that the fact that I came to it as a newbie, then I looked at it as a work of literature, not as a book of scripture. And then I found that it was the most secular text. That's how it spoke to me, at least. I can't say that it is, because, the Gita speaks differently. Like any great book, or any book at all, it speaks very differently to its audience depending on who is reading it, based on your own life experiences and whatever, and and your, as I like to say, even your samskaras from previous life, that tells you how you engage with the book. So the writer's job is just to write the best thing and then let go of it and say now it belongs to the reader, whatever. So that's why I was very terrified. But when I read it, I found that, when I read it in the original, I didn't know Sanskrit, I had never learned Sanskrit, so I had to read it English commentaries. But I read commentaries by Indian authors and philosophers and Western, because I said, because I'm speaking to the young generation of today who have both of that in them. So I have to then, my language and my way of presentation should be appealing to them. If I make it too Indian, then I lose my audience. If I make it too Western, people are going to throw stones at my house. So it has to be like a combination of the two. But I didn't. The thing was, I didn't have to manufacture the reverence. I really felt it when I read it. It really transformed me. I think it's a great text, and that's why my editor I had said no. And she, for some reason, she pursued me for 6 months. She just felt I was the person to do it. I have no idea why. So I call her my Krishna. She's my Krishna. She always steers my chariot into battlefields that I want to run away from. And she says, Arjuna, do your duty. Write it. She forces me to do these things. Yeah. So I felt like it was a responsibility to present it as I saw it. Not only because it will help children in their lives, or anybody who reads it in their own lives, but also so that everybody knows it, so that they don't get swept away by other interpretations of it, which may be geared for some agenda. So if you know it, then you can stand and say, no, I don't think that's what it says. But if you don't know it at all, how do you fight?
People say it speaks to you in different ways, different phases of your life.
Of course.
If you are in a certain situation, it will speak
Yes.
differently.
Yeah. It's true. Even in the 10 years, it's actually July 15th is 10 years since the Gita for Children came out. And it crossed 200,000 copies sold. Yeah, so it was one of those, my book, that's all. Which is not my book, it was through me. And how much I fought it. I said, I won't write it. children.
Children.
Because I thought that's why I did it in those 2 bits, no? So there was the main chapter where I just wrote what it said. And then there is a supplementary chapter where I don't have to, then I can talk to them directly. Because otherwise in all my other books for children, I use my own voice. It's a conversation, right? But in this, I didn't want to make it too much of a conversation because I didn't want them to lose sight of the fact that they're reading a 2,500-year-old text. So I wanted the English in that to be a little more formal. And then, but I also wanted to use my voice, so came upon this way of doing it. Yeah.
Last 30 years, what keeps you writing it? Why are you writing it?
Yeah, why am I writing? It's just an itch that I have to scratch. That's all. I have to do it, otherwise I'll go mad. That's why I do it. That's all. I find that I'm happiest when I'm deep in I'm sure Pratibha will agree with me, I'm sure you also feel the same. When you're deep into it, that's when your mind is at absolute peace. Any other time it is,
Every time you get an audience where they are exclusively, the engineering aspirants.
I just had it yesterday,
And
okay, last
if
week.
you would write to them,
Yeah.
what would be the element that you would like to convey to them?
To the engineer, it doesn't matter what they're studying.
If they are only engineers, what would be the element that you convey?
I will probably find something that will be relevant to them in their engineering life, in their student life. Because you have to then go to what they understand and explain it through that.